and welcome to the Sabbath services here with the United Church of God B.E.E.S congregation, the Baltics, Eastern Europe, and Scandinavia. We're glad to have you along with us. This week has been another eventful week in the news, and of course, as we watch the news, sometimes it can be a bit discouraging. We see leaders, particularly political leaders, doing all sorts of things that sometimes seems a little bit beyond our control, but we try to find where we fit into what's happening in the world. And sometimes people get to their phones and they start texting or they start posting things on social media, trying to relate to the situation. And what you find is sometimes people take positions that are perhaps a little bit untenable, perhaps a little bit arrogant. Sometimes people fall into taking sides over issues, and they will take that side and they'll ride that side right into the ground, right, where there's no recovery, and they may simply be going down on a path that's very extreme, that's very wrong, but once they take it, they're going to stick to it. And where does that come from? And is it healthy? Is it good? It's a problem that's increasing in our world today. We can see it all around. We can see it in the news media. We can see it, of course, if you go to social media, where people are posting things all day long, every day, their opinions about issues, whatever they may be, whether it be the war in Ukraine, or whether right now it be over the situation in Venezuela, or whether it be around Greenland. These are issues that are arising. They're hot button issues. They're very divisive issues. They're very they provoke a lot of emotion, and then people start taking positions on those. And while the positions can, I suppose, be right or wrong, depending on how you look at it, oftentimes it's the attitude behind what's being said that is causing more of a problem than anything else, and prevents people from being able to work together. And that's what I want to talk about a little bit today. I've titled the sermon, The Perils of the Proud. The Perils of the Proud. Because what really drives it, we can look in the book of James, and we see it talks about where wars and things of that nature come from. They come from within ourselves. They come from taking a position, and they come from pride, wanting to be right about something, wanting to be indignant about something, wanting to act like we know it all and our position is right, and whatever the situation is, and we just ride that. And sometimes we do it to the detriment of relationships. Sometimes we do it to the detriment of our own reputation. We can cause a lot of problems. There are real perils associated with that attitude and with the pride. And I should add, when I'm talking about pride, I'm talking about arrogance, really, that is very unhealthy and can damage our spiritual relationship with God, can damage our physical relationships with each other. So we're going to talk about those perils today, and we're going to do it by looking at the Bible and the examples that the Bible has for us, because historically, some very great figures have dealt with this issue of pride, and their examples have been left for us. And we're going to look at some of the examples of these historical figures and see what we can learn from each as we go through the message today about how we can avoid the pitfalls they fell into, and make sure that pride doesn't consume us. So let's start by turning to the book of Daniel. The book of Daniel and chapter 4. We'll see several examples that the Bible has, several historical figures that lived in times not altogether unlike what we live in from a political perspective, I guess you might say. There's always been wars and rumors of wars. There's always been leaders around the world of nations who were very arrogant and so forth. And some of those examples have been recorded and what happened to them for our benefit. So let's start here in Daniel chapter 4, verse 29. Here, of course, is Nebuchadnezzar, the great king of Babylon. And he'd had a vision, and he'd just been told what the vision meant, and it had some bad news for him. And it says here down in verse 29, at the end of 12 months, he was walking about the royal palace of Babylon. Babylon was a great king, or Babylon was a great empire, and Nebuchadnezzar was a great king of that kingdom. So after the vision, he's walking about the royal palace, and the king spoke, saying, "Is not this great Babylon that I have built for a royal dwelling by my mighty power and for the honor of my majesty?" That's pretty arrogant, isn't it? I mean, he did it all himself, right? All about him. There was no one greater than him at that time. Is this not the great Babylon that I've built for me? That was the attitude. He had a very arrogant attitude. And I think looking back in history, we could see that. And in verse 30, while the word was still in the king's mouth, a voice fell from heaven. King Nebuchadnezzar, to you it is spoken, the kingdom has departed from you. And they shall drive you from men, and your dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field, and they shall make you eat grass like oxen. And 7 times, being 7 years, shall pass over you until you know that the Most High rules in the kingdoms of men and gives it to whomever he chooses. Nebuchadnezzar was about to learn a very valuable point, and in all of his pride and all of his arrogance, he was going to learn a lesson that God is the one that is in charge. God is the one who sets up kingdoms, and you wouldn't be able to do anything, Nebuchadnezzar, without God. You draw your breath because God has made it so. And Nebuchadnezzar needed to learn this lesson. It says that very hour, verse 33, the word was fulfilled concerning Nebuchadnezzar. And he was driven from men and ate grass like oxen. He went crazy. His body was wet with the dew of the heaven till his hair had grown like eagle's feathers and his nails like birds' claws. Nebuchadnezzar had a great fall. Why? Well, it says down in verse 17 in the same chapter, the decision is by the decree of the watchers and the sentence by the word of the holy ones, in order that the living may know that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men and gives it to whomever he will and sets over it the lowest of men. Nebuchadnezzar wasn't maybe as great as he thought he was. God sets people up, even the lowest of men, in positions to fulfill his purpose and to fulfill his will. God allows these things to happen. And as Nebuchadnezzar learned, God can in an instant take it all away. So we shouldn't be boastful and proud and arrogant. We shouldn't be going around telling everyone about all the amazing accomplishments that we've made, glorifying ourselves, how powerful we are. This separates us from God. It's the sin of Satan. It's exactly what Satan did when he was in the form of Lucifer. That's why he became Satan, the adversary. He became adversarial to God because he thought he was better than God and wanted to receive all the glory himself. Nebuchadnezzar's pride was rooted in his achievements. He looked at what his own hands had done and he forgot the God who gave him the breath and the capability to do the things that he had done. This is a pitfall we have to look out for. One of the perils of pride, self-glorification. Look what I did. Look how great I am. There's no one as good at this as me. A great peril that we should be wary of and not allow to creep into our lives, lest God humble us. I remember growing up and uh, very athletic in my youth, and would hear coaches often say something to the effect of, there's always someone better. There's always someone better. You work hard, right? And it's something we should always take note of. We live and we breathe because God is there, because God made us. And never forget that. And never forget that He made all of the other people around us as well. And He has assigned value to each of them. And while we might be better at one thing, we're not better necessarily at the other. And we should never put anyone else down and feel our achievements somehow make us better than others. Our successes somehow make us better than others. Oh, God has given us each talents, each valuable, and calls us each His children. So let's not allow the pitfall or the peril of pride, that is self-glorification, separate us from others and separate us from God by beginning to feel like we're better than everyone else and that they somehow owe us something and they should somehow listen to everything that we have to say and follow us. You see how that starts to create animosity. Let's look at Proverbs chapter 16. Proverbs chapter 16. Much to say in the book of Proverbs about this subject. And in relation to Nebuchadnezzar here, something very, very relevant. Proverbs chapter 16 and verse 5. Everyone proud in heart is an abomination to the Lord. An abomination to the Lord. Why would that be? No, we just talked about some of the reasons. It'd be an abomination to God because when you're proud in heart, it separates you from God. You start to think that you don't need God. Look, I've done all this myself. Where was God? Well, God has made you. He created you with the faculties and the talents, and He created the universe, the environment, everything that enables your success. Everything that enables your success was because of God. And we start to forget that when we start to glorify ourselves, right? And it starts to separate us from others. We think we're better than everyone else. So in God's mind, that makes you an abomination. And continuing, he says, though they join forces, none will go unpunished. Nebuchadnezzar found that as he ate grass for 7 years under the dew, lost his mind. He was humbled greatly. You know, Isaiah 2 says, the lofty look of man shall be humbled, but the Lord shall be exalted. So let's take note of this peril of pride. That is self-glorification. Another great figure struggled. Let's tune to Second Chronicles with a different element, a different peril of pride. Second Chronicles chapter 26. And forgive me if I'm a little slow getting to the scriptures today. I've finally broken down and got a new Bible since I've been using the same one since 1994, and it's getting a little ragged. But I have to find where everything is in this new one and get the pages broken in. Second Chronicles chapter 26 and verse 1. Now all the people of Judah took Uzziah, who was 16 years old, and made him king instead of his father Amaziah. And Uzziah, he built Elath, and he restored it to Judah after the king rested with his fathers. Now, he was 16 years old when he became king, and he reigned 52 years in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Jechaliah of Jerusalem. And he did what was right in the sight of the Lord, according to all that his father Amaziah had done. He was righteous up to this point. He did what was right in the sight of the Lord. He saw God in the days of Zechariah, who had understanding in the visions of God, and as long as he sought the Lord, God made him prosper. So we see is sort of a change in tenor here in the text. Now, verse 6, he went out and made war against the Philistines, and he broke down the wall of Gath, the wall of Jabneh, and the wall of Ashdod, and he built cities around Ashdod and among the Philistines. God helped him against the Philistines, against the Arabians who lived in Gerbel, and against the Meunites. Also, the Ammonites brought tribute to Uzziah, and his fame spread as far as the entrance of Egypt, for he became exceedingly strong. And Uzziah built towers in Jerusalem at the corner gate, at the valley gate, at the corner buttress of the wall. Then he fortified them. Also, he built towers in the desert. He dug many wells, for he had much livestock, both in the lowlands and in the plains. He also had farmers and vine dressers in the mountains and in Carmel, for he loved the soil. Moreover, Uzziah had an army of fighting men who went out to war by companies, according to the number on their roll as prepared by Jalel the scribe and Maaseiah the officer under the hand of Hananiah, one of the king's captains, or Hananiah. The total number of chief officers of the mighty men of valor was 2,600. That's the chief officers. And under their authority was an army of 307,500 that made war with mighty power to help the king against the enemy. Then Uzziah prepared for them, for the entire army, shields, spears, helmets, body armor, bows, and slings to cast stones. And he made devices in Jerusalem, invented by skillful men to be on the towers and the corners, to shoot arrows and large stones. So his fame spread far and wide, for he was marvelously helped till he became strong. God made Uzziah strong. He was righteous. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, and he became strong. He had a highly advanced military, technologically advanced, very powerful, very skillful. He became sort of a military superpower, defeated all of his enemies. No one could stand against him. In verse 16, but when he was strong, his heart was lifted up. His heart was lifted up to his destruction. He transgressed against the Lord his God by entering the temple of the Lord to burn incense on the altar of incense. This was a grievous mistake. If you go back in the scriptures of Numbers 18, you find there was a warning about this, that only the priest were to do this. And here he was transgressing. He was ignoring the warning that God had made. And he gets called out for it. So in verse 17, Azariah the priest went in after him. And with him were 80 priests of the Lord, valiant men. And they withstood King Uzziah and said to him, it is not for you, Uzziah, to burn incense to the Lord, but for the priest, the sons of Aaron, who are consecrated to burn incense. Get out of the sanctuary, for you have trespassed. You shall have no honor from the Lord God. And they were not just saying this because they felt their jobs were threatened or something of this nature. Numbers 18 makes it very clear that it was only for them to do, and then anyone else would suffer very serious consequences. But Uzziah had ignored that. He was the great king, had a great, powerful military. He could exert his will, and no one could do anything about it. So he stepped into arenas he had no business in because he was consumed with his pride. His arrogance overwhelmed him. And this is one of the perils of pride. He became presumptuous, feeling like he could do whatever he wanted to do. Who could stand against him? And Uzziah became furious because someone did stand against him. He was furious. And he had a censer in his hand to burn incense. He didn't listen to correction. And Uzziah would have known. He would have known that this was not something he should be doing. The kings had to write out the law with their hand. He would have seen this. He would have known this. And yet, here he went and he did it anyway. And when someone came and brought it to his attention, when someone stood up against him and said, what you're doing is wrong, he became furious because that's what pride does. It cut off his capacity to hear reason because no one can tell me what to do. I'm the great, powerful Uzziah. There's no one like me. Like Nebuchadnezzar, he forgot who put him in that position. Like Nebuchadnezzar, he forgot it was God, that God gave him breath, that God helped him with this strong army, helped him to build it, helped him to win victory after victory with the prophets by his side. And continuing in verse 19, while he was angry with the priest, leprosy broke out in his forehead before the priest in the house of the Lord, beside the incense altar. And Azariah the chief priest and all the priests looked at him, and there on his forehead he was leprous. So they thrust him out of that palace, or out of that place. And indeed, he also hurried to get out because the Lord had struck him. King Uzziah was a leper until the day of his death, and he dwelt in an isolated house because he was a leper, for he was cut off from the house of the Lord. And Jotham his son was king, judging the people of the land. The peril of presumption, the peril of thinking that you're too strong, you're too great to be told no, that you're too powerful to be dictated to by anyone lesser than you. First of all, if you're looking at anyone as lesser than you already have a problem, because now you're consumed with pride. You're consumed with arrogance. No one's less than you. They might be different, but not less, not in God's eyes. And furthermore, though you might have a skill or a strength that they don't have, they will have skill and strength that you don't. We're all just different. But arrogance, pride in ourselves, looking at our strength and our might can blind us to that fact. And we can begin to look down on others, and we get separated from God. And it will destroy us, because without God, we're nothing. Let's look at Proverbs 11. Going back to Proverbs. Proverbs 11, and it's interesting because these are kings of two great, mighty powers here that we're told about, both of which came to just a sudden, devastating loss. I mean, immediate, right away. They thought everything was great and wonderful. They had no idea that in all their boasting and all their arrogance that they were going to be smitten immediately. And it was all going to be gone. How powerful were they really? They couldn't prevent that, could they? Not very powerful. Not very powerful. But in their mind, they were. But in reality, they simply were not. And how foolish do you look after that? Proverbs 11, verse 2, when pride comes, then comes shame. Uzziah experienced shame. He became a leper, had to live in isolation, separate. His mighty boasting came to nothing. Such a strong man by perception, but he couldn't prevent the leprosy that came upon him and put him away. And he ended his life in isolation and shame. It says, but with the humble with the humble is wisdom. And in that wisdom, we don't put down others. The Bible talks about not boasting and the downfall of your enemies. That's wisdom. We should never boast in the downfall of our enemies. We should never elevate ourselves and say, look what we did to them. I mean, that's terrible. We should never take the attitude like that. King David, a man after God's own heart, that's one of the things he was known for. He would never boast in the downfall of his enemies. In fact, he felt bad for them. He prayed for them. He was, and he certainly wouldn't lift his hand against them. He's a man after God's own heart, a humble servant of God. He made mistakes, but he was a humble servant of God. So beware the peril of presumption. The next peril, the peril of personal vengeance. Let's look at Esther. Esther, the book of Esther. As we turn over and look at a example again from history, this time not a king, but still a very powerful individual. Esther in chapter 3. New Bibles are nice, but the pages like to stick together. Esther 3 and verse 1, it says, after these things, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, and advanced him and set his seat above all the princes who were with him, elevated him. Boy, he came into a high, powerful position, Haman did. And then verse 2, and all the king's servants who were within the king's gate bowed and paid homage to Haman, for so the king had commanded concerning him. But Mordecai would not bow or pay homage. And the king's servants who were within the king's gate said to Mordecai, why do you transgress the king's command? And it happened when they spoke to him daily and he would not listen to them, that they told it to Haman to see whether Mordecai's words would stand. For Mordecai had told them that he was a Jew. As a Jew, he wasn't going to bow down to the man. He was only worship to serve God. This was a kind of a worshipful bow to the kings at that time, and he refused. And it happened so that when Haman saw Mordecai did not bow or pay homage, the Haman was filled with wrath. Here we go again. That pride, it brings on anger, doesn't it? It brings wrath. You're not giving me the respect due to me, the respect I deserve. See, an inward focus. Pride is always inward looking, always what I did. Oh, look how strong I am. Oh, I deserve respect. Look at me. You better show me respect and honor, or else. And that was the attitude here of Haman, of course. In verse 6, he disdained to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had told him of the people of Mordecai. He was so angry. He didn't want to just get Mordecai. Instead, he said, Haman sought to destroy all the Jews who were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, the people of Mordecai. He was going to destroy the whole ethnicity. This is what pride does. Makes you lunatic in the head. It makes you just completely irrational to where you do things that are just absolutely absurd. The peril of personal vengeance, feeling like you've been slighted and, oh, I've got to get back at someone. I've got to show them who I am. I've got to show them my worth now because I've got to act out. I've got to put them in their place. That's sort of the attitude. And that comes from pride. It comes from arrogance. Who are you really to show anyone anything? You wouldn't breathe if it wasn't for God. And that's what we have to remember, right? And have that humble attitude. Our fates can change in the moment, in the blink of an eye. We're all flesh and blood. Do we walk and breathe on this earth because God's will, his protection, And there are so many things that could just erase us from existence immediately, every day that we encounter. Where is our boasting? But Haman felt he was really something. And not only was he something, he was going to show how much of a something he was by destroying a whole people, eradicating the people from the face of the earth. How absurd is that? But that arrogance has a way of coming back on you, as it did with Haman. In chapter 7 and verse 5 of the book of Esther, a lot happened in between, but we're kind of breaking in toward the end. King Ahasuerus answered to Queen Esther, "Who is he who is basically trying to eradicate you and your people? Who would dare presume in his heart to do such a thing?" Here's that presumption. Who is he who would dare do such a thing? And then verse 10, they found, of course, it was Haman, and they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. And then the king's wrath subsided. So Haman met a very fateful end, just like those before him. So far, the pride is not working out, is it? This feeling of self-importance, this feeling of great power, self-glorification for all your successes, this uh, presumption of strength, that you can do whatever you want, this feeling that you're owed a certain respect, that you're going to get those who don't show you that. Not working out very well, is it? So far, we're seeing the end, the demise of all of these individuals. None of them have come to any success with these attitudes. Let's look at Proverbs 16. Proverbs chapter 16. Because pride doesn't lead us to success. Pride sets us up for a downfall. I tell you what, there's no downfall more powerful, more humiliating than the one that you set yourself up for, with all your boasting and all your arrogance about what you're going to do, and then when you get humbled, it's especially embarrassing, isn't it? Haman's pride was rooted in his status, in his particular status. You know, the Ozias was in his strength, Nebuchadnezzar in his successes, Haman's was in his status. He was important, and people needed to recognize that. That was important to him. He wanted to feel elevated above everyone else. He wanted to feel powerful. He wanted to be shown a certain amount of respect. And that pride cost him his life. He was so consumed by his right to be honored that he plotted the destruction of a whole people just because someone refused to bow down to him. And as a result, he met his own end. Proverbs 16 and verse 18, pride goes before destruction. That's exactly what happened to Haman. A haughty spirit before a fall. Those words are true. They're not just nice words written on a page. They're true. One thing pride does is it blinds us. It blinds us to our own arrogance. We start feeling like we're entitled to respect. We start feeling like, oh, we're strong and powerful and we're so successful. We can do whatever we want. We're better than everybody else. We can get away with whatever we want. And God says, no, it doesn't work that way. And as soon as you start to think that way, you start to miss things. You start ignoring warning signs and you imperil yourself with the pride, perils of pride. Let's look at Acts chapter 12. We'll see another example. Acts chapter 12. We're just covering a few examples here. There's lots of them in the Bible. This is a major issue But we're going to learn from a few prominent historical figures here about the mistakes that they made. I wanted to choose these particular individuals because they were so prominent in their positions and their power in history. I mean, they looked untouchable. They felt untouchable, right? They had all the resources of the empire at their disposal. They thought they couldn't be reached. But no one escapes God's justice. No one escapes, no matter how powerful you think you are in this world. And if God will reach out and touch someone in that position and that status, which none of us have attained, do we think God wouldn't be able to reach us if we allow ourselves to be imperiled by pride? Acts chapter 12 and verse 20. Here we're looking at Herod Agrippa, uh, king during Christ's time and immediately after Christ's time and during the New Testament church. In Acts chapter 12 and verse 20, Herod had been very angry with the people of Tyre and Sidon. And we'll just break into this part here. He'd been very angry with those people, but they came to him with one accord. And having made Blastus, the king's personal aide, their friend, they asked for peace because their country was supplied with food by the king's country. Here was a trading situation. And they needed to appease the king. So they just showered him with praise because he was threatening their resources. So on a set day, Herod, arrayed in royal apparel, sat on his throne and gave an oration to them. And the people kept shouting, "Oh, the voice of a God and not of a man." I mean, they were really heaping praise on him. They were really elevating Herod. And apparently he was eating it up. That's in line with his personality. You can read a little bit more about him in Acts 12. He liked to get honor from the people. He see down in verse 3 of Acts 12, after it shows he kills James, the brother of John, with the sword because he saw it pleased the Jews. He proceeded further. Sees Peter also. So he liked to do the things that would get him recognition. He liked the praise. He saw he did something that pleased the Jews. It got him praise and approval and affirmation. Boy, he would just keep on that path. He liked it. He eat it up. And people began to realize this about him. And here, the people of Tyre and Sidon maybe were manipulating him because they knew this. They're just heaping praise on him because they needed to make sure they continued to receive the resources for their nations that they needed. And he just ate it up. He didn't redirect it. He didn't honor God. And they literally told him, "This is the voice of a God, not a man." In verse 23, immediately an angel of the Lord struck him because he did not give glory to God. And he was eaten by worms, and he died. But the word of God grew and multiplied. And Herod was nothing. God's purpose went on. God was going to continue to do his will, but he wasn't going to allow Herod to keep playing that role, acting like he was a god, that he was really something. Particularly when Herod was out killing his servants for praise. Isaiah 42, well, we'll just look at it. Isaiah 42, verse 8, because it reveals something important along these lines. Isaiah 42, verse 8, "I am the Lord, that is my name. and my glory I will not give to another, nor my praise to carved images. God was not going to allow Herod to go on and act like he was a god in this respect. And he met his end very carefully. Let's look at Luke chapter 14. Luke chapter 14. Very quickly, rather, he met his end. Luke chapter 14, and we'll start in verse 11. Luke 14, verse 11. For whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. So, see, there's a cure. We can humble ourselves, or God will humble us. We exalt ourselves, we can look for God to humble us. Doesn't mean we can't rise to positions of power in this world. It just means that we need to keep a level head on our shoulders. That we need to honor God, and we need to act appropriately. We need to follow God's law, not boast, not put others down, not seek to destroy others, not be intertwined with all of these perils of pride. Because if we are, God will humble us. And if he humbles us, what does that mean for all those who depend on us? How do they feel? How do they suffer? But if we're full of pride, we're not concerned about that, are we? We're only concerned about how we benefit. Not interested in how all of those that are downstream are impacted, or how they'll feel about things, or what consequences they might suffer if we fall. Pride is an awful thing. It really is. And if we feel like we have it in our lives anywhere, we need to root it out. We need to humble ourselves. We need to think differently. And if maybe we're a little bit too blind to see it, we think we have no problems, no faults. Well, that is a fault, because you do. We're not being honest with ourselves. Then we need to ask God to help us see it, to search it out, so we can get rid of it and not be imperiled. In this case, with Herod, it was the peril of usurping praise, taking praise where praise wasn't due, taking praise from God, not redirecting it to the proper place. That's what pride does. That's what Satan wanted to do. Satan wanted all the glory for what God had done. He wanted to be like God. He wanted people to praise him. We've got to be careful about that. And let's look at one more peril of pride. Let's look at Daniel 5. Daniel 5. This peril is the peril of willful ignorance. The peril of willful ignorance. As we turn to Daniel 5, think about our modern society and how some of the things I mentioned before in the introduction fall into these perils. When people get on social media and they start posting about political things, and they take a very decisive, very arrogant approach. What is that driven by? What is it driven by? It's arrogance. It's pride. We have to be careful about that. If we're posting things to try to put others down, if we're posting things to try to hurt the feelings of others, that's pride. If we're posting things to try to earn respect for ourselves, that's pride. If we feel like someone's not seeing our point of view and we've got to show them, that's pride. And we have to think about it and the perils that are associated with it. Daniel chapter 5 and verse 1. Here's Belshazzar. We read about Nebuchadnezzar earlier and what he went through for 7 years. Well, now here's his son. Belshazzar the king made a great feast for 1,000 of his lords, and he drank wine in the presence of the 1,000. And while he tasted the wine, Belshazzar gave the command to bring the gold and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken from the temple which had been in Jerusalem, that the king and his lords, his wives, and the concubines might drink from them. So here are the things that were made for the service of God in the temple. And they brought the gold vessels that had been taken from the temple of the house of God, which had been in Jerusalem. They drank wine, verse 4, and praised the gods of gold and silver. Can you imagine? Drinking from the vessels taken out of the temple of God. They praised the gods of gold and silver and bronze and iron and wood and stone. This is tempting God, isn't it? I mean, this is begging for something terrible to happen. In the same hour, the fingers of a man's hand appeared and wrote opposite the lampstand on the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. And the king saw the part of the hand that wrote. And the king's countenance changed, and his thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his hips were loosened and his knees knocked against each other. It scared him half to death. I mean, his legs were shaking. You ever been real nervous or scared or something like that? Your legs just start shaking, your knees knock. I have once. That's what he was going through. The king cried aloud to bring in the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers. The king spoke, saying to the wise men of Babylon, whoever reads this writing and tells me its interpretation shall be clothed with purple and have a chain of gold around his neck, and he shall be the third ruler in the kingdom. I mean, that's just how upset he was, how disturbed he was. I mean, we're going to give this guy whatever he wants if he can tell me what's going on and make him the third ruler in the kingdom. Down in verse 17, we see Daniel came in and answered, and he said, before the king, let your gifts be for yourself and give your rewards to another, but I will read the writing of the king and make known to him the interpretation. He says, O king, the Most High God gave Nebuchadnezzar your father a kingdom and majesty, glory, and honor. God gave him all those things. Starts out reminding Belshazzar of these things. And because of the majesty that he gave him, all peoples, nations, languages trembled and feared before him. Whomever he wished, he executed. Whomever he wished, he kept alive. Whomever he wished, he set up. And whomever he wished, he put down. But when his heart was lifted up and his spirit was hardened in pride, he was deposed from his kingly throne, and they took his glory from him. Then he was driven from the sons of men. His heart was made like a beast, and his dwelling was the wild donkeys. They fed him with grass like oxen. His body was wet with the dew of heaven till he knew the Most High God rules in the kingdom of men and appoints over it whomever he chooses. But you, his son, Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart, although you knew all this. Belshazzar was willfully ignorant. His pride and his arrogance made him overlook the lessons of the past, made him overlook the example of others, thinking he was too good to fall into those same traps. Oh, that happened to someone else, but I'm better than that. It won't happen to me. He's willfully ignorant, like so many today. Yeah, I can think of people like, for instance, get on and start talking about science, right? And they defend things that are just absolutely untenable. They're willfully ignorant. Romans talks about how we know there's a God. Creation itself teaches us that, but people are willfully ignorant of it. They don't want to encounter knowledge that will cause them to change their path. They'll overlook it intentionally. They don't want to see the other side of the story. In today's world, social media really plays into that, because social media, the algorithms only tell you things that will make you continue to click. So they tell you things that are nice that you want to hear. And too few people will actually go and look and see what's being said on the other side, to see if it makes any sense, to see if there's any rationale to it. And of course, we know that the truth always lies somewhere in the middle, right? But the algorithms keep you on one side and reinforce you and make you feel like you're justified and you're right about every single thing that you think. And people too often are willfully ignorant, because it makes them feel good to be reinforced their ideas because of pride. Willful ignorance is one of the biggest perils of pride. It keeps us from seeing what's right in our face. It keeps us from seeing truth. And that's what happened to Belshazzar. You did not humble your heart, although you knew all this. You had the example right there. You saw it, you witnessed it, and you still ignore it. He says, verse 23, you lifted yourself up against the Lord of heaven. And they brought the vessels of his house before you, and you and your lords, your wives, your concubines have drunk wine from them. You knew where these came from. You knew it was the God of heaven that struck your father down. And yet you dare do something like this? And you have praised the gods of silver and gold, bronze and iron, wood and stone, which do not see, hear, or know. And the God who holds your breath in his hand and owns all of your ways, you have not glorified. Well, that's a powerful statement, isn't it? The God who holds your breath in his hand and owns all your ways, you have not glorified. It's telling Belshazzar, you are essentially nothing without God. And the fingers of the hand were sent from him, and this writing was written, and this is the inscription that was written. Mene, mene, tekel, upharsin. He says, this is the interpretation of each word. Mene, God has numbered your kingdom and finished it. Tekel, you've been weighed in the balances and found wanting. Perils, your kingdom has been divided and given to the Medes and Persians. Then Belshazzar gave the command, and they clothed Daniel with purple, put a chain of gold around his neck, made a proclamation concerning him that he should be third ruler in the kingdom. And in that very night, Belshazzar, king of the Chaldeans, as we know from history, was slain. And Darius the Mede received the kingdom. Willful ignorance doesn't save you, doesn't preserve you. It sows the seed of your demise. And that's a pitfall. Let's look at Proverbs 29. Proverbs 29. And verse 23. A man's pride will bring him low, but the humble in spirit will retain honor. The humble in spirit will retain honor. You know, this was an example set for us. Let's look at Daniel 4. Daniel 4. We were just in Daniel 5 looking at Belshazzar and what he went through. But you know, in Daniel 4, we go back and we see the example of his father one more time, and Nebuchadnezzar After he had eaten grass for 7 years and he had been severely humbled by God, we see in verse 37 of Daniel 4, he says, "Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol and honor the King of heaven, all of whose works are truth, and his ways justice, and those who walk in pride he is able to put down." Nebuchadnezzar learned. Nebuchadnezzar changed. Nebuchadnezzar repented. He humbled himself. God humbled him, but he retained that humble. And he learned his lesson. And it says, of course, in Proverbs 29, verse 23 that we just read, um, while a man's pride will bring him low, the humble in spirit will retain honor. As Nebuchadnezzar humbled himself and stayed humble after God put him through what he put him through, he retained his honor, didn't he? He came back from it. But first, he had to be humbled. Let's look at Mark 7. Mark 7. See, Belshazzar knew all of those things. He saw it, he witnessed it, but he refused to learn from it. He was willfully ignorant of it, and as a result, he lost his kingdom. He was killed. Mark chapter 7 and verse 21. For from within out of the heart of men proceed evil thoughts, adulteries, fornications, murders, thefts, covetousness, wickedness, deceit, lewdness, an evil eye, blasphemy, pride, foolishness. All of these things come from within and defile a man. Notice how pride and foolishness are associated. Willful ignorance is foolishness, and it's associated with pride. It's a great pitfall that will do us in, so we need to be alert to its devices. Pride's a spiritual sickness. The higher we elevate ourselves above God and above others, the more dangerous and inevitable our descent becomes. We need to be aware of that. So we can look at the examples God has given us in the Bible of these great figures from history. Nebuchadnezzar, his source of pride was his achievements, was his success, and he fell into the peril of self-glorification as a result. And of course, he had a temporary fall. He had insanity, but he retained his honor after he was humbled. We had Uzziah. Source of his pride was his great military power, his strength. And as a result, he became presumptuous. He felt he could do whatever he wanted to do, and he got into some religious matters that God had forbidden him from. He felt like no one could tell him any different. He could do whatever he wanted, and the result was leprosy, isolation until he died. Come back on him. We had Haman, who had this great social status, and that social status became so important to him. He felt everyone should bow to him. When they didn't, he sought not only vengeance on the individual, but literally everybody is in his bloodline. The result was a reversal of his plans to execute, and he was himself was executed. We saw Herod, this great political figure who had this power to do things. He gave these great oratories. He had this influence. That was a source of his pride. And he accepted worship from the people as if he was a god. He usurped praise God, that only belongs to and only God deserves. He enjoyed it. And he received sudden judgment punishment of death. And then, of course, we saw Belshazzar, who simply was just willfully ignorant. He had all these examples in front of him. He knew about pride, and yet to be seen as a great, powerful man that he saw himself as, he took the vessels from the temple, drank from them, and praised false gods in such an audacious and prideful and arrogant way. All these men thinking they were untouchable. All these men thinking confidently in themselves that they could do what they wanted and there'd be no consequence. But we're never greater than God. We should remember that. There are great perils associated with pride. We need to appreciate that, understand it, and make sure we humble ourselves and drive those away. If we see any of these things creeping up in our lives, any of these tendencies, to ask God to help us to get them out so that we don't get separated from God, we don't get separated from one another. Proverbs 3. Proverbs 3, it's verse 34. Proverbs 3 and verse 34. Surely he scorns the scornful. God does. But notice he gives grace to the humble. He scorns the scornful, but gives grace to the humble. To those who are putting others down, who see themselves as something great, God puts them down. But as with King David, he gives grace to the humble. And James 4 talks about it another way. It says, God resists the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. Brethren, that's the way we avoid the same fate of these four men. That's the way we avoid being put down and humiliated and by pride. It's through humility. It's a simple solution, but in name only. It's hard to do. But brethren, let's not be willfully ignorant. Let's know the lessons. Let's learn the lessons. Let's study the lesson. Let's study it in our lives. Let's not get caught up in those things that are going on around us in the world, which it's easy for people to take pride in, whether it be national pride, military pride, whether it be the pride of the self, whatever the case might be, getting into arguments, trying to put others down, and all of these divisive things. Realize where it comes from. Realize what it's doing. Realize it's a device of Satan. And understand the perils of pride. And brethren, let's humble ourselves so that we can avoid that fate that has ensnared so many before us.